Welcome back to the Phantom Route. Tonight, I have a story that will make you think twice before turning off the lights. The story is called The Bedroom Where the Lights Turn On by Themselves. So, sit back, relax, but don't get too comfortable. Because what you're about to hear isn't just another ghost tale. It's a chilling account of family who discovered that sometimes the darkest corners of a home hide the brightest, most terrifying secrets. Let's begin. The house on Elderwood Drive didn't look unusual at first glance. It stood with its white siding and dark green shutters, nestled between two other suburban homes that looked almost identical. To anyone passing by, it was just another stop in a neighborhood where lawn sprinklers clicked on every morning, kids rode their bikes in circles, and neighbors waved politely but never really talked. For the Ramirez family, though, this house was meant to be a new beginning. Angela and Michael Ramirez had been searching for a place of their own for nearly 2 years. After years of renting cramped apartments, they finally stumbled upon the 2-story house with its modest backyard, an attached garage, and 4 bedrooms, more than enough space for them and their 2 children, Lily, age 11, and Daniel, age 7. The realtor had used words like cozy, perfect starter home, and full of character. Angela, exhausted from endless showings, had almost immediately fallen in love. Michael, though more cautious, admitted it was the best option within their budget. The house had stood empty for nearly 9 months before the Ramirezes moved in. The previous owner, a widower, had passed away quietly in his sleep in the master bedroom, or so the neighbors said. It didn't strike Angela as unusual. People died in houses all the time. Still, there was something about the way the neighbors exchanged quick glances when they mentioned it that unsettled her. They moved in late summer. The air was heavy with the buzzing of cicadas, and the children were thrilled to finally have rooms of their own. Lily immediately claimed the corner bedroom upstairs, the one with a large window that faced the street. Daniel chose a smaller room across the hall, which seemed to swallow him with its strange silence. The first few weeks passed without incident. Boxes were unpacked, new furniture arrived, and life began to settle into a routine. But on the 3rd week, something strange happened. Something that Lily was the first to notice. It was a school night, and Angela had just tucked the children into bed. The house was quiet, the only sound the distant hum of a passing car. Around midnight, Lily woke up suddenly. She wasn't sure what had disturbed her. Perhaps a dream, perhaps the creak of the old wooden floorboards. But when she opened her eyes, she froze. The ceiling light in her bedroom was on. Lily blinked rapidly, certain she must have left it on by accident, but she clearly remembered her mother turning it off. She sat up, heart thumping, and looked toward the switch by the door. It was flipped up as though someone had walked in and turned it on while she slept. "Mom," she whispered, but the hallway was silent. She waited for a moment, then climbed out of bed and turned the light off herself. Crawling back under the blanket, she tried to dismiss it as her imagination. The next morning, she told Angela about it over breakfast. "You probably just dreamed it," Angela said, spreading butter over toast. "You've been nervous about school starting. Sometimes our brains play tricks on us when we're tired." Lily wanted to believe that. She really did. But 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, she woke to find not just the overhead light glowing, but also her bedside lamp. Both were switched on. By the end of the week, Daniel reported the same thing. His room lights would turn on in the middle of the night, sometimes startling him awake, sometimes already glowing when he rolled over. Michael checked the wiring. He had some handyman experience, and he suspected faulty switches or maybe a short circuit. But after an afternoon of tinkering, he found nothing wrong. The electrician they eventually called confirmed it. The wiring was old but functional. Nothing to explain the lights turning on by themselves. Still, the family pushed the incidents aside. Life was busy. Work, school, bills. Flickering lights were the least of their concerns. But then the strangeness escalated. One Saturday night, while the family watched television in the living room, the upstairs lights began to flick on and off rapidly. First Daniel's room, then Lily's, then the hallway. Angela gasped, clutching the armrest. Michael leapt to his feet, muttering about circuits. He rushed upstairs, but the moment his foot hit the landing, every light went dark again. "See," he said breathlessly when he came back down. "It's just faulty wiring. I'll replace the switches." But his voice didn't sound convinced. The following week, Angela woke at 2:37 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. At first, she thought it was Lily or Daniel going to the bathroom, but when she glanced into the hallway, she saw no one. What she did see made her blood run cold. Every light upstairs was blazing. She hurried from room to room, checking on the children. Both were asleep, undisturbed. She turned off the lights and returned to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. A nagging thought gnawed at her. Who had turned them on? By the end of the month, the lights were no longer just an inconvenience. They were a menace. Sometimes they would snap on in broad daylight, startling Angela while she folded laundry. Other times they would stay stubbornly off, even when switches were flipped. Michael began to lose patience. He replaced switches, bulbs, even an entire breaker panel. But the problem continued. He grew irritable, dismissing Angela's whispered fears. "It's an old house," he insisted. "Things like this happen." But the neighbors knew better. Mrs. Keller, the elderly woman next door, caught Angela one afternoon while she was weeding the front garden. "You moved into the old Prescott house, didn't you?" Mrs. Keller asked, her voice low. Angela wiped sweat from her brow. "Yes. Did you know him? The man who lived there?" Mrs. Keller hesitated. "We all knew him. He kept to himself, mostly. But after his wife passed, well, strange things started happening in that house." "What kind of strange things?" The old woman's eyes flicked toward the upper windows of the Ramirez home. "Lights. Always the lights. On, off, at all hours of the night. Some said it was grief, that he left them on so he wouldn't feel alone. Others said, well," she lowered her voice further. "Others said it wasn't him at all, that it was her, his wife, coming back to remind him she was still there." Angela laughed nervously. "Ghost stories." Mrs. Keller didn't smile. That night, Angela dreamt of a woman standing in the corner of her bedroom, her face obscured by shadow, her hands reaching toward the light switch. When she woke, the bedroom lamp was on. Angela kept the dream to herself. Michael was already frustrated enough with her superstitions, as he called them, but she couldn't shake the image of the faceless woman hovering near the light switch. The next few nights passed in uneasy silence. The house seemed to rest, as though the strange energy had ebbed away. But on the fifth night, the silence shattered. It was Daniel who screamed first. His cry jolted Angela and Michael from their bed. They rushed into his room to find him huddled beneath his blanket, trembling. "What happened?" Michael demanded, flipping on the overhead light. Daniel's wide eyes darted toward the far corner of the room. "There was someone in here," he whispered. "A lady. She was standing by the lamp. She turned it on. I saw her hand." Angela's blood ran cold. Michael barked, "It was a dream, Danny. Just a dream." But Daniel shook his head violently. "No, Dad. I saw her." Michael left the room in a huff, muttering about imagination. Angela stayed behind, smoothing Daniel's hair and whispering comforts until he drifted into an uneasy sleep. Yet she couldn't deny what he'd said. It matched her own dream far too closely. The following week, the house grew darker in ways Angela couldn't explain. The air felt heavier. Shadows clung to corners longer than they should, and the lights, always the lights, continued their erratic dance. Sometimes they flickered rhythmically, almost like Morse code. Other times they blazed so suddenly that everyone in the house jumped. Lily began sleeping with a flashlight under her pillow. Daniel refused to be alone in his room at all. One evening, while Angela folded laundry in the upstairs hall, she heard a faint click. She turned to see Lily's bedroom light snap on. The switch flipped itself downward with a sharp flick. Angela's laundry basket tumbled to the floor. She ran into the room, but no one was there. That same night, Michael was jolted awake by a voice whispering his name. He sat up, heart pounding, and scanned the room. The bedside lamp glowed softly, though he swore he had turned it off before sleeping. "Angela?" he whispered. But Angela was sound asleep beside him. Angela couldn't ignore it anymore. The next afternoon, she sought out Mrs. Keller. The old woman listened quietly as Angela poured out everything. The lights, the dreams, Daniel's sighting. Finally, Mrs. Keller nodded. I thought as much. It started after she died. Her name was Evelyn Prescott. Sweet woman, though quiet. She passed suddenly in that very bedroom of yours. Angela's breath caught. The master bedroom? Yes. Afterward, her husband claimed he couldn't sleep in the dark. He said Evelyn didn't like the dark, that she kept turning the lights on. He'd wake up with every lamp blazing. Sometimes even the neighbors saw it from outside. Angela felt a chill creep down her spine. So, you think it's her? Mrs. Keller's lined face grew grim. I don't know what I think, but I know the Prescotts weren't the only family who had trouble in that house. There was a couple before them, years ago. They didn't stay long. Said the lights had minds of their own. Angela left with a knot in her stomach. That evening, Angela recounted everything to Michael. He rolled his eyes at first, but she could see his resolve cracking. Even if what Keller says is true, he muttered, pacing the kitchen, it doesn't mean it's a ghost. Maybe faulty wiring scared them too. But his argument fell apart later that night. At precisely 3:03 a.m., the entire house lit up. Every bulb, every lamp, even the porch light outside. The brightness was blinding, searing their eyes as if the house itself had been struck by lightning. Angela screamed. Michael stumbled from bed, shielding his face. The children wailed from their rooms. And then just as suddenly every light died. They were plunged into suffocating blackness. Angela clutched Michael's arm. Still think it's wiring, she hissed. Michael didn't answer. From then on, Michael could no longer deny it. Something unnatural lived in their home. The Ramirezes tried to carry on, but the disturbances only grew worse. Daniel began reporting that someone sat on the edge of his bed at night. Lily claimed she heard footsteps pace her room while she pretended to sleep. One night, Angela herself saw it. She had gone to check on Lily around midnight. As she opened the door, she froze. A figure, a woman, stood by the light switch. Her outline was faint, shimmering like heat rising from asphalt, but her hand was clear, pale and long-fingered, resting on the switch. Before Angela could speak, the figure pressed the switch down. The lamp flared on, and then the woman was gone. Angela staggered back, her breath hitching. She wanted to scream, but her voice failed her. Instead, she shut the door gently and fled to her own room, where she sat trembling until dawn. Desperation drove Angela to contact a local priest. Father Gregory agreed to visit the house. He blessed each room, sprinkling holy water and murmuring prayers. The family felt a brief reprieve. For 3 nights, the house was still. Angela dared to hope it was over, but on the 4th night, the lights returned with vengeance. Not only did they flicker, but objects began to move. A chair dragged across the floor, a book flung from a shelf. During one terrifying episode, Angela watched helplessly as every bulb in the house exploded simultaneously, showering glass across the floors. The priest returned, shaken. "If prayers don't help," he said grimly, "you may need to speak with someone who understands hauntings more practically." At Michael's reluctant agreement, Angela contacted a paranormal investigator named Claire Dawson. Claire was calm, practical, and carried an array of cameras, meters, and recording devices. As she set up equipment in the upstairs hallway, she explained, spirits often manipulate electricity. Lights, electronics, they're drawn to energy. If what you're experiencing is real, the lights are their way of announcing themselves. That first night, Claire stationed cameras in Lily's and Daniel's rooms, plus one in the master bedroom. She set up an EMF meter by the hallway switch. At 2:46 a.m., every device spiked. The cameras captured something chilling. The switches flipping down by themselves, one after another, like invisible fingers pressing them in sequence. The lights blazed. The children screamed. Claire's voice, caught on tape, trembled as she whispered, "It's intelligent. It knows we're watching." Angela wanted to leave that very night. Pack the kids, drive away, never return. But Michael insisted they couldn't just abandon the house. They had nowhere else to go, So they stayed, and the spirit, emboldened, grew bolder still. Claire Dawson returned the next evening, determined to gather more evidence. She brought a second investigator with her, a tall man named Derek who specialized in audio phenomena. They placed recorders in every room, set motion sensors in the hallways, and waited. The Ramirez family huddled in the living room, the glow of a single lamp their only comfort. Claire tried to keep them calm, but Angela could see the tension in her eyes. At 1:12 a.m., the first bang echoed through the house. It was loud enough to rattle picture frames and send Daniel diving into his mother's lap. Derek sprinted upstairs to check the source. He returned pale, holding up a shattered bulb. It didn't fall, he said. It exploded in place. Angela clutched her children tighter. Escalation. The disturbances grew more violent with each passing night. Doors slammed hard enough to crack the frames. Furniture shifted inches at a time when no one touched it. The lights no longer just turned on. They flared like lightning, searing white, then plunged the house into suffocating darkness. One evening, Michael entered the master bedroom to find every lamp arranged in a circle on the floor, their cords knotted together. He stood frozen, unsure whether to laugh or scream. Angela began to notice changes in herself, too. She grew restless, quick to anger, her sleep broken by whispers she couldn't quite understand. Sometimes she woke to find the bedside lamp on and the distinct impression of someone sitting in the chair across the room, watching. Lily and Daniel fared no better. Lily had nightmares so vivid she refused to close her eyes until exhaustion overcame her. Daniel wet the bed for the first time in years, too afraid to get up in the night. Michael, once skeptical, now avoided being alone upstairs. He refused to admit it outright, but Angela caught him checking over his shoulder more than once, his jaw clenched tight, the shadows in the light. Claire's cameras captured more than just switches flipping. One night, while reviewing footage, Angela froze. In Lily's room, a faint shadow hovered near the lamp, long, thin arms reaching toward the bulb. The figure had no face, no details, just a black outline against the glow. When the light snapped on, the shadow vanished. Claire rewound the footage again and again. "This isn't a glitch," she whispered. "It's something using the electricity as a doorway." Angela's stomach turned. A sleepless night. At 3:07 a.m. one stormy night, Angela awoke to the sound of Lily's voice. "Mom? Mom, please come." Angela bolted from bed, Michael close behind. They found Lily standing in her doorway, trembling. "My light," she whispered, pointing. "It won't turn off." Sure enough, the switch clicked uselessly under Angela's hand. The bulb blazed, humming faintly. When Michael tried to unscrew it, the glass burned his fingers. Suddenly, the hallway lights flared too, then Daniel's room, then the bathroom, each one snapping on in rapid succession until the upstairs shone like midday. And then the laughter started. It was faint at first, like static from a radio, but it grew clearer, sharper, distinctly female. The sound echoed down the hall, cruel and mocking. Angela clapped her hands over Daniel's ears. Lily buried her face in Michael's shirt. Claire's equipment went wild, meters spiking, recorders crackling. Derek shouted, "It's right here with us." The lights all went out at once, plunging them into darkness. In that instant, Angela felt a cold breath brush her cheek and a hand, icy skeletal, press against hers on the switch. She screamed, breaking point. The next day, Angela insisted they leave. "We can't stay here anymore. This house doesn't want us." Michael rubbed his temples. "Where will we go? We can't afford a hotel long term. We can't break the mortgage like this. We're trapped." But Angela shook her head. Better broke than buried. That night, Angela packed bags with children, planning to take them to her sister's house 2 towns over. But as she zipped the last suitcase, the lights in the room blinked in a slow, deliberate pattern. On, off, 3 times. When she turned, she saw her mirror glowing faintly, the reflection distorted. For just a moment, a woman's face stared back at her, sunken eyes, pale skin, lips curved into a grim smile. The bulb above her exploded, showering glass across the dresser. Angela dropped to her knees, clutching her children close as they cried. The figure in the bedroom. 2 nights later, Michael encountered the spirit himself. He had gone upstairs to fetch a toolbox when he stopped in the master bedroom doorway. A woman stood in the far corner. She was faint, translucent, but undeniably there. Her hair hung in damp strands, her dress old-fashioned, and her hands hovered over the switch. "Who are you?" Michael whispered, his voice trembling. The woman turned her head slowly. Though her face blurred, her eyes gleamed like shards of light. The lamp snapped on. Michael stumbled back, the toolbox clattering to the floor. When he looked again, the woman was gone. He didn't speak for the rest of the night. The investigator's warning. Claire returned with her findings after reviewing weeks of footage and audio. "It's not just residual energy," she said grimly. "This spirit is intelligent, interactive. It wants your attention. And the more you react, the stronger it gets." Angela clasped Michael's hand, but his grip was limp. Claire continued. "It might be Evelyn Prescott, but I'm not convinced she's the only one. There's a darker energy here too, something feeding off fear. The lights are only the beginning. If it escalates further..." She didn't finish the sentence. A house awake. From then on, the house never rested. Lights snapped on at all hours. Shadows moved against walls. Voices whispered in the children's ears. The family stopped sleeping upstairs altogether, dragging mattresses into the living room, huddling together like refugees. But even downstairs, the haunting followed. The overhead light above them would flare suddenly, casting their terrified faces in harsh relief. Lamps turned on one by one, circling them as though trapping them in a cage of light. Daniel sobbed openly. Lily clutched a crucifix she'd gotten from Father Gregory, whispering prayers under her breath. Angela no longer tried to calm them. She was too busy watching the switches, waiting for the inevitable click that signaled the presence had returned. And still every night, the lights turned on by themselves. The night they decided to end it, the sky over Elderwood Drive was a flat sheet of slate. No stars, no moon. The house felt charged, as if it were drawing breath. Claire set her final array, a wide-angle camera in the master bedroom, a thermal imager in the hallway, digital recorders in each corner, an EMF meter by the light switch that had become the center of everything. Derek taped glow-in-the-dark markers along the switch plate, so even in a blackout, they could see the lever move. "We ask questions," Claire said quietly. "We keep calm, and we don't give it fear to feed on." Angela nodded, though her hands shook. Michael stood behind her with Lily and Daniel half hidden in his arms, the 4 of them a tight knot of breath and bone. 3 a.m. crept toward them like a tide. Claire started the session in the master bedroom. "If you are Evelyn Prescott, we're listening. We live here now. We mean you no harm." The EMF meter ticked high, then fell. Derek asked, "Did something happen to you in this room?" A soft click, like a fingernail on plastic. The switch lever trembled, stopped, then pressed down. The lamp snapped on. The meter spiked hard enough to squeal. Claire steadied her voice. "Thank you. If you're Evelyn, could you tell us why you turned the lights on?" A cold brushed Angela's forearms. She swallowed. "Is it because you were afraid of the dark?" she asked, her voice breaking around the last word. The lamp flared brighter, as if an answer, and from somewhere deep in the house the upstairs hallway lights cascaded on. 1, 2, 3 for like a path being lit. "Okay," Claire said gentler. "We hear you." The temperature dropped. Their breath fogged. On the thermal imager, a shape bloomed near the switch. Human height, cold in the air, with one hand raised as if forever caught mid-reach. Derek's recorder popped with static, and then cleared to a whisper that wasn't any of their voices. He turned them off? Everyone froze. Who turned them off? Claire asked. The whisper came again, stronger, braided with a grief that hit Angela in the gut. He did. Michael's eyes flicked to the breaker panel across the room, the new one he'd installed when the lights first started. Her husband, he whispered. Prescott. As if summoned, the panel door shuttered open. The breakers were all set to on. A different click sounded, metal not plastic, and the main lever slammed down by itself. Every light in the house died. Lily gasped. Daniel clutched Angela's waist. In the sudden blackness, the only glow was from the stuttering LEDs of Claire's equipment. Then, in the dark, the house woke. Footsteps went up the hall and back again, slow and deliberate, pacing the places where the glow markers made a dim ladder of green. From the corner by the switch, something began to laugh, a low male sound, thick with pleasure at their flinch. "That's not Evelyn," Derek said, voice tight. Angela's spine filled with ice. She didn't think. She simply moved, stepping between her children and the sound. "Stop," she shouted into the dark. "This is our home. You don't get to scare my kids." The laugh caved into a hiss that seemed to scrape the paint. The cold deepened. From the hall, the lights fired back on all at once, not from the breaker. Impossible with the lever down, but as if the bulbs themselves had decided to burn. Light blasted through the doorway, hard white and wrong, shadows thrown at impossible angles. Claire's camera caught it. The hallway switches flipping down in a row, not by hands, but by density air, as though fingers had pressed through water. "Evelyn," Claire said over the glare, "we want to understand. Did he turn the lights off when you needed them on?" The thermal shape at the bedroom switch shivered. The lamp near it blinked once, twice. "Did you fall?" Angela asked, not sure why the word rose in her throat like a bubble. In the dark, the recorder clicked so loud it stung. Then clearly, "Stairs?" Angela's eyes filled. She saw it without wanting to. A woman try to reach the switch. The house a series of dark mouths, a foot missing the top step because a hand had cut the light. Why would he? Michael started, then bit it off. Because control. Because cruelty. Because he could. The male laugh rolled again, nearer. The bulbs all over the upstairs blossomed into a punishing brightness that carried heat like the sun. Paint blistered in a line. A picture frame on the hallway wall snapped with a gunshot crack and fell. "Claire," Derek said, "we have to end this." "How?" Angela asked. Her throat was hoarse. "We can't fight light." "We don't fight the light," Claire said. She looked at Angela, really looked. "We changed the rules." She moved to the window and tugged the curtains wide open. Street lamps threw a softer glow across the floor. Dawn was a rumor on the horizon. Claire turned to Angela. "You said you felt her hand on the switch. She's tied to that act. To the fear of dark, that came before the fall. Give her what she needed. Stop giving him control." Angela understood. She didn't know how, but she did. She picked up the small bedside lamp and carried it to the hallway. With a burned paint smelled like a bad memory. She set the lamp on the floor at the top of the stairs, facing the first drop where a foot might hesitate, and plugged it in. "This one," she said, voice steadying, "stays on, always." The male presence surged. The hallway bulbs roared, then popped one after another. Bang, bang, bang. Showers of glass skipping across the floorboards. But the little lamp at the landing held steady. A pool of constant, stubborn light. Angela stepped between it and the switch. "You don't get to touch this." The laugh tried to rise, but a new sound braided through it. A thin, keening note that was not rage but relief. The cold at Angela's back softened. The glow markers on the switch plate dimmed as if something was drawing away. Claire lifted the recorder. "Evelyn, if we keep this light on, will you stop waking the house?" A long pause. The EMF meter, which had been screaming, fell to a gentle hum. "Please," the recorder breathed. A woman's voice, clear as glass in morning water. Daniel laid his cheek against Angela's hip, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the shape of his weight without flinching. Michael exhaled a breath he'd been holding for days. Derek glanced at the breaker panel. The main's still down. "Leave it," Claire said. "Just for a minute." They waited. The house adjusted to the single lamp like an eye learning to see again. Shadows arranged themselves into sensible shapes. A banister, a picture, the fringe of a rug. The terrible brightness was gone. The wrong angles smoothed. "Is he still here?" Lily whispered. The thermostat ticked as though thinking. From afar in the hall, down by Daniel's room, a dark seam opened, a draft without wind, a whisper of stairs to the attic that weren't theirs. The laugh tried one last time and failed. It tore into a sound like a match drowning in rain. "Go," Angela said to whatever was left of the man who liked the dark. "You don't live here." The seam thinned, the cold with it. Claire lifted the main breaker. Power rolled back into the bones of the house, like a quiet tide. The little lamp kept shining. No other light reacted. They waited for the inevitable. It didn't come. They kept the landing lamp on for 3 days and 3 nights. On the 4th, Claire brought over a small brass nightlight she'd found at a second-hand shop. The shade was etched with a field of lilies that threw petals across the wall. "It's old," she said. "Quiet. It won't hum." They plugged it into the outlet near the top stair. It cast an oval of light, not much bigger than a dinner plate. Soft, kind. That night, no bulbs exploded. No switches flipped. No laughter threaded the air. At 3:03 a.m., Angela woke out of habit and lay listening. The house sounded like a sleeping animal. Breath, pipes, timber relaxing. She could hear the tiny click of the nightlight's filament expanding and contracting as the current held steady. She cried without shaking the bed, and when she wiped her eyes, her palms smelled faintly of brass. The quiet held a week. Then, too, they started sleeping upstairs again. The first night, the whole family camped on the master bedroom floor like they were testing a frozen lake. The second, the children returned to their rooms. The third, Angela left a note by the landing lamp. "We'll keep the light for you." On the 4th, she dreamed. In the dream, a woman stood at the top of the stairs. She was no longer just a blur of cold. She had a face softened by time and worry. Hair swept back, a dress smooth as though she finally had a place to wear it. She looked toward the landing lamp and smiled, not at the object, Angela thought, but at the fact of it, at the idea that light could be chosen. "Thank you," the woman said without sound. Angela woke to the faintest pressure against her fingertips, the way someone might graze your hand when passing you in a crowded theater. She turned her head. The lamp on the nightstand was off. It had been off all night. She did not turn it on. They found the letters by accident near the end of August, in a shallow compartment beneath the lowest dresser drawer in the master bedroom. A loose runner kept snagging, and when Michael finally wrestled the drawer free, an envelope slid out, paper worn thin where a thumb had rubbed it over and over. The handwriting was neat, the kind taught to girls in schools with ink pots. Evelyn Prescott's words told a story without complaint. He says electricity is wasted on women. He says night is good for the soul. I am trying to be obedient, but the stairs frighten me when he turns everything off. A final note in a different hand, Mrs. Keller's, as it turned out, spoke of Evelyn's fall, the inquest that called it an accident, the widower who outlived his neighbor's sympathy. Angela brought the letters next door. Mrs. Keller read in silence, one hand pressed against her collarbone. "I always wondered," she whispered. "He was so proud of how Lily spent. Lights like candles. He used to boast about it. They made copies for the Historical Society. No newspaper cared, but a thin piece settled into the woodwork of the house when the truth existed somewhere besides in the dark. By the first week of school, Elderwood felt like a neighborhood again. Lily joined choir. Daniel made a friend who loved trains. Michael fixed a porch step that had worried him since their first walkthrough. Angela planted a row of lilies along the front fence without thinking much about why. At night, they left the landing nightlight on. A small, stubborn sun. Sometimes the hallway switch made a soft sound after midnight. Not a click, more like a fingertip remembering. When it happened, the brass shade threw petals a little farther down the wall, as if someone had leaned in to see them better. On an October Sunday, Claire dropped by to retrieve her last case. She stood at the top of the stairs a long time, watching the oval of light. "You know," she said, "I don't think she ever wanted to scare you." "I know," Angela said. She wanted out of the dark. Claire nodded toward the switch. "And the other one?" Angela watched dust swim through the oval like slow fish. "I think he left when we stopped playing his game." Claire smiled crookedly. Most of them do. They said goodbye in the doorway. After Claire's car turned the corner, Angela stood alone in the hall. The house listened. "Thank you," she said softly into the air that belonged to them now. for warning us." She went downstairs. The nightlight kept its watch. Weeks later, on a Rain Street Tuesday, Angela took the kids to the grocery store. The clouds had stacked themselves into a lid, and the parking lot lamps came on early, each one a halo and mist. When they came home, arms full of paper bags and chatter, the living room was dusk dim. Michael called from the kitchen that he'd left a pot on the stove, and Angela laughed. Something she'd do again without it sounding like breaking. She set a bag on the hallway table. As she did, the lamp on the table blinked once. Not a flicker. A blink. On, off, on. The exact rhythm the hallway bulbs had used on the night she packed their bags. Angela's body went cold for a heartbeat and then warm. She didn't move. The oval on the landing glowed steady as ever. "Evelyn," she said, "is something wrong?" Silence. The lamp held. Angela listened harder. The fridge hummed. The pot boiling. Daniel thudding up the porch steps because he'd forgotten something. Lily humming a choir scale under her breath. Then, faint as a memory the house might be dreaming, there came a sound from upstairs. A click. Not hard, not greedy, just a testing of muscle. Angela climbed, hand on the banister. At the top, she paused. The nightlight made its little moon. Down the hall, Lily's door stood half open. Angela pushed it with her fingertips and looked in. The room was as they'd left it. Bed made, homework on the desk, a sheet of choir music under a pencil. The lamp on the dresser was off. The switch on the wall was down. On the mirror, written not in steam but in a clean, almost prim finger line through dust that hadn't yet had time to settle, were 4 words. "Thank you for seeing." Angela let out a breath she hadn't known. She was holding, and rubbed the words away with the heel of her hand. She did not want Lily to wake to them and start measuring the dark again. As she turned, the landing nightlight brightened a fraction, no more than a heartbeat's worth of glow, like someone smiling without teeth. "Good night," Angela said. "We'll keep it on." She went back down the stairs into the ordinary clutter of their life. Pasta, backpacks, the sound of a spoon against a pot. Behind her, the small light burned, patient and sure, and the house settled its weight on the foundation the way a body settles into a chair after a long day. Much later, after the dishes, after the homework, after tucking the children into bed and kissing their foreheads without checking the corners for movement, Angela and Michael lay in the master bedroom with the windows open a little to the rain. "Do you think it's over?" Michael asked. Angela listened to the soft electric breath of the nightlight at the top of the stairs, the shortest path in the world, made visible and kind. "I don't think it was ever about us," she said, "but I think we're part of the ending." They slept. Near 3 in the morning, out of long habit, Angela woke and listened. The house breathed. Somewhere outside, a car hissed through water. Inside, the little light kept its pulse. She closed her eyes. And in the moment between waking and sleep, a distant bulb in some unused closet that had always been hard to reach blinked once, as if from far in a hallway nobody needed anymore. It blinked again, softer. Then it went still.